I'm sure you're already doing this, but just to say you might put in the structure ways that they can feed back so that you can hear how they're processing what you're teaching them, so that it's not just going sort of that way. And then you can sense like, how are they receiving this? How is it making sense for them? It's, yeah. You're put in a position, particularly in those situations, not like this, but where students are coming for their socialized schooling, that you're put in a position of trust that we trust that you're doing what's best for them, and they trust that you're doing what's best for them. And so sort of in that compact of trust, you have a certain freedom to do what's best for your students. And so as long as you're, as I'm sure you are, relating to that intention honorably, you shouldn't have to worry.
So I'm just thinking about sometimes I'll teach like a class online like this, and I'll say that I should make sure I know the students first.
It also depends on how you're teaching it. I mean, really, it's sort of like, if you're teaching them, well, what you do matters, which is a way of teaching emptiness. That's a little different than sort of saying, you don't have any self or something, or like you seeing the glass, but there's no glass here. So it's sort of like, I'm sure that you're teaching them in a way that's like supporting where they are and how old they are, but for some people that I know who work with younger students, I mean, it really has nothing to do with age. Different students are available for all kinds of different things, and people in their 60s might not be ready to hear, this is not really a glass out here, right? So, so once you get to know them better, you can start to get in. But if you're just meeting them for the first time, I would say just make sure it's on a level that is pretty light and pretty applicable to their doing situation, where they don't have to go into like a spin internally, that they might go off to some place that you don't know where they're going. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for teaching 8th graders emptiness. It's good for everyone. The younger the better. However that happens. Anybody else? Anything that come up while you weren't here? In the weeks?
We'll talk next week.
Okay. All right. So let's just do a short meditation to arrive. Bring yourself here in a way that's meaningful for you. That might be through just sensing your weight, connecting to the earth, and allowing yourself to become grounded, or by taking some deep breaths. Maybe letting your eyes and forehead relax if there's a lot happening in your brain. Allowing the luxury of having this time to be still, quiet, spacious, allowing that to nourish you. into your heart a moment that you remember when the boundaries between yourself and others fell away. Or you might say a moment when the clouds parted and things suddenly became completely clear, open, spacious, and loving. It doesn't really matter how this happened. Recall the sensation. And it's helpful to recall the situation to bring you back to the sensation. And then play with the possibility of allowing the situational aspects, or the objects, the person or the place or the thing that feels like it initiated this experience, fall away. And with that, if you can, play with the sense of the self, the subject, that's even having the experience fall away. And experiment with simply resting in that open warmth, that open love, so that your whole being is infused with that. There's nothing that's separate, not even a witness, witnessing that happen. If you lose your way, you can always bring yourself back to the situation, reorient yourself to the catalyst for that experience, and then play again, dropping the subject and the object and all the specifics, all the narrative, resting in the flow of experience. Take a very slow transition. And in the transition, I'd like you to consider what it is for yourself that keeps you from being in this state through your day. What habits or ideas do you hold about the self that bar you from this openness? As you come out of meditation, as you're considering that, you might just jot one or a few of those down for yourself. take a moment, and if people are comfortable, obviously you don't have to, but if you'd be willing to offer forth something that feels meaningful for you in terms of what came up for you, it might be nice to just hear probably how similar we are. Just share our experience. And I also just want to note that, again, probably, I mean, everyone started writing. So it wasn't like, I don't know what blocks me. I don't know. You know, we're clear. It's not that we're not clear. We are clear about our situation. If we just take a moment to take it in, we are clear. There might be another question of, you know, what keeps you from keeping you sort of taking it in and being clear. But I just want to point that out, that we all know the work we need to do. We're all clear on that. And I find that very enlivening. We're not lost at all. So, does anybody want to?
I'm in the habit of starting to worry. As soon as a problem comes up, it's just like, well, I have to worry about it. You know, there's something I need to do, I have to worry. And I catch myself, why am I worrying about this? I'm working on it, I've done things, you know, and it's like, why? It's just such a habit.
Yeah.
And at least I'm becoming more aware of it and laughing at myself, actually. It's like, well, why am I doing this? It's so unnecessary and ridiculous.
It's so inspiring to hear you say that you can start to laugh at yourself, because that to me that's a major step. When you can go, look at this. You know, because in a way, as soon as you can add that levity to it, you suck the power from it, actually, and then you can really like work with it. So, yeah.
Two things for me. One is being too eager to go to the next thing, and so not allowing myself the time and space to just relish in whatever that is in that moment, or just accept whatever it is in that moment. It's like, well, the next I'm gonna, or just feeling that desire to move out of that space into another space, and then also kind of just seeing the negative things more than seeing the positive things. So,
Yeah. Similar to fixating on being work.
I could holding on to the idea of what we should be instead of appreciating what we should be.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one for all of us. Yeah. And do you feel like, this would be the same question for all of us, right? Once you identify these, then the question is, do you feel like you have a strategy? You know, it seems like you have a strategy for now starting to work with that, right? Or continuing to work with it. So it's like, do you have a strategy for that?
Yeah, I kind of imagine I use breathing and just kind of breathe the blockage out when I try to hold on to a moment or an idea.
Nice.
And just let it breathe.
Nice. Yeah, good. So that's really key, that the first step, of course, is an awareness of what might be possible. So it is possible for us not to live our life in illusion. It is possible for us not to live our life in suffering, thinking about what's next, what should be, if it's not, and worrying all the time, and that is possible. So even that ground level is a huge step to recognize it's possible to live another way. And of course, the texts have very true and ways to share that with us, to be able to articulate it in our own way. But then, and what's your strategy? You know, what are you going to do about it? And so often, you know, I find this with some people that I work with who are processing addictions, and maybe people have processed this too, or are processing this in their life. You know, sometimes it's just a big step to say, I have this problem, you know, I have this addiction. But then people can get stuck there. And it's sort of like, then your life becomes about, you know, well, I have an addiction. That's my issue, you know. And so the point of identifying the issue is not that you then identify with the issue.
as like, oh, well, now that's my issue. So that's myself. I'm so special because I worry. I'm so special because I'm trying to plan ahead, you know, or something. The point is that you figure out the strategy for how to clear that, right? So really important. And if something came up that people feel like, I don't have a strategy for this, and you want to talk about it, we can talk about it, or we can talk about it personally, privately, or, you know, think about it for a week and see what comes up for you. Because sometimes, you know, sometimes things come up and there's a surprise. I mean, often, I didn't write it today, but often what comes up for me is planning, which is similar to, you know, and I can find that I do have strategies, but I sort of feel like there's an ultimate strategy that I'm still trying to sense, you know? So sometimes we can kind of figure out Band-Aids, but we're still like, what's going to really clear it, you know? But you got to start with Band-Aids probably at the beginning. Anybody else? What else came up for folks? Yeah, Luna.
Focus on what the tendency, I'm thinking of David because he said, you know, like, this has stuck with me.
David's my partner.
He said, don't focus so much on what went wrong, focus on keeping going. And so that would be a big one for me. And it seems like kind of piggybacks on what you were saying, like, you know, instead of focusing on or being like, yeah, I have this addiction, or this is, you know, on the what's wrong,
Right.
not getting stuck there, and then either using it as an excuse, like, okay, I'm just stuck here,
Right.
or being, you know, flogging myself, just then going into some indulgence of low self-esteem or self-pity, so that kind of like atrophies or paralyzes me, and then I can't feel my intrinsic goodness. And so I get, you know, it's like a pattern getting stuck there versus just like what I'm working with right now, which is the keeping going, like the things that, okay, got it, and we're gonna keep going, you know, we're not gonna go too far into that. We're gonna do what we need to do to kind of clean that up and then just keep moving, you know.
And do you feel like, is that
Functioning for you?
Getting
Yeah, good.
stronger, for sure. So that would be a big one.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting, like,
To notice, so like for some people, in a way you could say, well, Geneva's like saying, well, my issue is my mind keeps going, right? So you might say to someone like Geneva, so Geneva's working on how to settle in, maybe how to be, we'd have to talk deeper about it, but, you know, maybe how to be with something that is worrisome. You know, maybe the pattern there is the mind just doesn't want to look at it. Whereas you're talking about a pattern where the mind's like, all I want to do is look at it, look at it, look at it, right? Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, so we can see it at different, we have to be very discerning with ourselves and our, you know, our minds, our strategies, we need to be very fluid and awake to what's happening, because another thing that happens is we start to go, well, I'm this type of person, right? This is my problem. You know, but then you might find, well, that's your problem for this 5 minutes, you know, and then in the next 5 minutes there's another thing. And the bodhicitta and the joyful effort is to be present enough and meet what it is, because I imagine, Luna, that you're not in that state 24/7, right? It's like, it's a habit. We all have our kind of prime habits, but you probably have Geneva's habit too, and you have the worrying habit, and it's like we all have these other habits. So, so you know, just to recognize that. And it makes me think too about how when we're talking about being a bodhisattva, we could talk about that stream of keep going, you know, keep putting your attention on someone else. Like that is the primary strategy of the bodhisattva, is look to someone else. What can you do for someone else in this moment? You know, just notice what's going on, because as soon as we fall into those streams, it's going this way and not in a positive way. You know, when we're doing positive introspection, it's something else, right? But the negative introspection is just, you form all the clouds around you. We form all the barriers, right? So the bodhisattva strategy, the prime bodhisattva strategy is put your attention somewhere else. What can you do? How can I help you? And that's a great way to keep going. And to acknowledge that that is not easy. It is not easy from the point of view of the mental affliction that is going, I'm in pain, what about me? I'm a big loser, what about me? I have things to do, you know, I have things to worry about, what about me, right? And so I think it's really important to acknowledge for ourselves that the act of putting our attention on someone else is extremely courageous from the point of view of the mental affliction. From the point of view of the awakened mind, it's like, why would you do anything else? It would be your joy. It would be obvious. But from the point of view of the mental affliction, it will feel like it costs you something to do that. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that, because sometimes we go through these classes and it just starts to sound like it's no big deal to put your attention on others. And I'm talking about like in the most minuscule way, you know, when you're having a mental affliction, to just say, Vargas, do you need any water, is like a big leap, you know, let alone higher levels than that, right? So, and in a way there is no higher level than that. That is the action. That's all it is just noticing and extending yourself out. What else? I didn't mean to talk so much. Yeah.
I have trouble believing that samsara can end, which is, I find, a really big problem in me actually investing 100% in any of this activity. What?
That's like the question of the century. No, it's a really good question. Well, the first thing that comes to me, which I think is maybe a more challenging way to look at this, but is that to start to become less concerned with whether samsara will end or not, and more concerned with how you want to be with yourself and with other people in your life. So part of thinking, is this going to work? Will samsara end? Is habituating a self that is trying to possess and trying to own something and has a goal and is doing exactly what you just wrote down for yourself, which is skipping forward to some space, right? And so you have to say, as you're saying honestly for yourself, I don't know, right? Would you say that's accurate? I don't know. So I don't know includes it's possible or it's not possible. And that's actually a really positive space to be in. If you were saying to me, I feel very confident that I can't end my suffering, then we'd have to have a different discussion, or you wouldn't be in this class, actually. So I think we're all in that space at some time or another, or most of our day is in a space of agnosticism where we're sort of going, I don't know. So then you ask yourself, but you have to check in that if you really don't know, it means it is possible, could be possible, or it could also not be possible. So then you go, okay, I don't have enough information on one side or the other. Now, it would be helpful for you to know if it was one or the other, right? So my question would be, how are you going to find out if it's one or the other? What are you going to do to really find out, right? You could like run samsara into the grounds, you know? You could go like, I'm going to just keep going on this path until something becomes clear. And you know, I've had a similar conversation with Jed a couple times, who's not here today, but at the end of the day then, when I'm in that space, I ask myself, well, how do I want to be? If samsara is never going to end, still, how do you want to be right now? If you knew that your suffering wouldn't cease, and I'm really asking you to go home and think about this. I'm not saying these are easy answers, but if you were to find out that it wasn't possible to end your suffering in the way you think, the way you're imagining, right? How would you live your life differently? Would you start stealing? Would you start lying? I don't know, but it's like, what would you start doing differently, right? Or would you try to have the best life you can with what you have, right? And in a way, isn't that what you're already doing? So then you can ask yourself on the other side, if I was certain that it was possible for samsara to end, what would I be doing? And then sort of look and say, okay, how do those two categories relate to how I'm living my life right now? Because at the end of the day, all you have is this moment and how we are together, how we're sharing time together. And when you're in a space of agnosticism, it actually leaves a tremendous openness for you to be with yourself, for you to be very direct with yourself. Because I don't know is a great space of wisdom. I don't know. So, great. If you don't know and it's totally open, you're still got to act. So where are you acting from? Where's that impulse to act coming from, right? And then you can start to look at the self. You know, then you're getting into wisdom. It's like, okay, Geneva, so I don't know. The whole palette is clear, really, if I'm honest, because I'm not certain one way and I'm not certain the other way. And yet I'm going through my day, and I'm making choices. Who's making those choices? Where are they making those choices from? Who's that self that I'm moving forward, right? So, yeah. In a way, if you said to me, I'm certain that samsara can end, I would be questionable. I would be questionable. I mean, that's at a very, very, it's almost like, how can you be certain samsara is going to end until you get to nirvana? You know, when the historical Buddha came out of his enlightenment, the first teaching he said was life is suffering, right? Because for the first time in his life, he wasn't suffering. So he actually had a clear view in retrospect. So in a way, in our current suffering, we can't even really say life is suffering because we haven't seen the other side. And suffering, when we say life is suffering, it implies that there's no suffering. So in a way, we can't honestly say unless we're out of it, we've been out of it for a moment, you know. And that meditation that I was offering, I believe that all of us have had moments where we actually are free of suffering. They may be very fleeting, and we may forget them, right? And as I think I may have mentioned in the first class, sometimes they occur in moments of shock or moments of horror or tragedy, but everything gets open for a moment, and we're gone, right? So to touch base with those and say, well, who was there? Where is that? Is that samsara? Maybe, right? It's really good to question these things. As the Buddha said, like, you know, don't take anything I'm saying for certain. That's my experience, you know, but you got to live your life. You got to live your life, right? So you got to work it out for yourself. That was the kindest, you know, the last thing the historical Buddha said, as I'm sure many of you have heard. The last teaching he gave that was recorded on his deathbed, who knows what he really said, is that decay is inherent in all things, right? We will all decay. Seek out your own liberation with diligence. You got to figure it out. I can't do it for you. No one else can do it for you, right? So that's a really great place to be in. That's not an afflicted place to be in. It's a really, really positive place to be in. What else did people write down? What else came up?
I actually just have questions that I can answer.
Great.
So it's like I wrote fear, and then I wrote fear of what? Because that's like a habit that I come up with.
Yeah.
It's fear, but what am I afraid of?
Yeah, that's great.
And then I wrote, but I have to answer it. So I said losing something, and then I wrote losing what? Because it's just, I think it just becomes a habit to worry and to look at the negatives instead of the positive.
Yeah.
Sitting here on a Wednesday afternoon at, to something, I'm like, okay, what am I afraid of?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that, what Vargas is bringing up is so key, and just to say that shifting that habit takes real discipline. It takes it takes hours and hours and hours of sitting quietly like we were just sitting and asking those very questions of yourself until it's no longer intellectual, but you experientially have a shift where you go, there's nothing to be afraid of. And your life changes, right? So the other thing I would say along you got to work it out for yourself is don't give up until that happens. So we can all identify for ourselves, we have these first steps, we identify maybe what's blocking us, we have some strategies. Don't give up until you actually experience the transformation. Because if you have just one of those major transformations, you will start to get that sense like samsara is a goner. It's totally a goner. And it's also, simultaneously with that, is sort of overwhelming when you realize maybe how far you have to go or how much discipline is going to be required to actually do the work, you know. So those are great questions. What else? Anything else?
I had a similar one to you. I'm always planning, I'm always thinking about what's coming next. Not settled. And then another one that I wrote was just this feeling that people are separate from me, which is the question, but I don't know, I think a lot of that stems from maybe anger and judgment. Lama Maroon's partner.
Cindy?
Cindy?
Yeah.
Lama Cindy. Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, we were doing a moving meditation and we were supposed to think of somebody that we hated and feel compassion for them, and I had kind of a breakthrough. And I thought about someone that I really see doing horrible, horrible things, very close in my life. And sorry. And so that's what's really hard. Like when you see people doing these awful, awful things, remembering that, like I am because you are. Like keeping that kind of stuff in mind. Yeah. And then my meditations for the first time have been kind of dark since then. Like I've had dark stuff come up. So. Good. Yeah, I know. It's really hard. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. And that, again, no need to apologize for having emotion. We all have emotion. And if we didn't have emotion as part of our path, we'd have no energy to move, to share with people, right? So it's not only is it okay, it's sort of necessary to move through the path to have some emotion going on. Of course, we can get caught in that, but not if it's moving. It's a good thing. It seems like something wasn't moving and now it's moving. Yeah. And that's a great blessing, right? When it starts to move. And of course, it's uncomfortable when it moves because something was locked and then it's loose. It's like, oh God, what's happening? I'm feeling things. I'm not comfortable with that. And what you were bringing up about taking in that what you are seeing is related to you. That's really where compassion begins. It's really where compassion begins, is struggling with that space that you're struggling with. So I'm really happy that you're doing that. It's just too easy to say that's your problem. How could we be seeing it? How could we? And you could also think this, why would it bother you so much if it wasn't part of you? You see? If you were really separate from it, it wouldn't matter one way or the other. You'd be separate from it. But why are there things that cause us great joy and open our hearts and things that make us terrified and angry and frustrated? It's because we're identifying somewhere that we have those same tendencies. And that we can feel the tug that it is us. And part of us is going, that's not okay. But of course, you're seeing it outside of you instead of yourself, so it feels a little more out of control. And how do you relate to that? And, so, yeah. Anybody else before we move into vows? Okay. So, these are all, we're all addressing wisdom here. These are all things that are addressing wisdom, everything that's come up. And so to make the distinction, we can have knowledge or we can have understanding, or we can be wise. Those are two different things. And they're not exclusive of each other. So you can be wise and also have understanding of things. But those are different spaces. So wisdom is not something that you have or have gotten. Wisdom is discovered. And if you continue doing that meditation, that short meditation we did in the beginning, and I imagine, if you really look at whatever that experience was when everything became clear for you and you felt connected, it wasn't something you felt like you got, it was something that was revealed to you. And the feeling is like, oh,
well, that's always there, and then something shifts, right? So that again is taking us close to wisdom. The wisdom that is revealed to us is always present with us and is veiled. We can say veiled through affliction, veiled through all kinds of things, but it is veiled. But we must undermine our consumer capitalist tendencies that thinks I'm going to get it. Somehow I'm going to get it. I don't have it now, but I'm going to get the thing I want. It's much more shocking and provocative to say you already have exactly what you want. You've never not had what you want. You've never not been free of samsara. So relax. And then the worry mind's like, I don't want to relax. I have a lot of things I have to work on. I have a lot of things to do, a lot of concerns, a lot of people I'm angry at, you know. So not something gained but discovered. And, you know, if you have a question like, well, have I had any embodied wisdom? Have I had any experience of wisdom? Again, you just think to yourself, when have I felt connected? When have I felt in a unitive state? When have I felt those boundaries disappear? When have I felt spacious and open? When have I felt free? Maybe to the degree of fear, that level of openness, right? And of course, there are varying degrees of, and an infinite, you could say, depth to wisdom. But if, as we all have had, even a little bit of taste of it, then we can start to move towards that. Now, the other tricky thing is that wisdom is something that is graced. It is given to you through grace, in the sense that you can't will it to happen. So we can do practices that prepare ourselves, prepare our mind and our heart to be present for what is already there, okay? But, you know, we can't just sit down and say, I'm going to have a direct experience of reality right now. Here I go. Make it happen, right? We're not in control of the present like that. It doesn't work like that. So we have to put the causes into play to create the context, to create the container within our own spirit where the clouds can part. And then whenever that happens, it feels like grace. Just like, again, I think if you look at that experience you had, it's like, well, why did that happen in the moment it happens, you know? And you could say, well, because I love this person, or whatever it is, the situation, you know. That child was so cute, it just cleared my mind. Or, but it's like, well, how many people have you been in love with? Or how many cute babies have you seen? Or how many whatever it is? Why right then did it happen, right? The discovery it's always present. So we can't force grace, but we can be present to recognize grace. We can train ourselves to be increasingly present and habitualize ourselves to recognize that grace is always with us, always with us. Wisdom is always with us. We just miss it because we're so busy looking at all the reasons why we're not graced, right? I was talking to David about this morning. He was talking about obsessing on something, and he's like, isn't it funny, you know? I'm so blessed, and yet I'm sitting here obsessing on this thing about how, you know, angry I'm not blessed in this sense. And he's like, but yet I'm so blessed. And we laugh, you know, we laugh because it's true, and we should also cry because it's so tragic, because we are so blessed. You know, all of us in this room, and all of us, every being is blessed. No one is separate from the grace of God or the grace of the divine. We have decided that we're separate. We have a very clear decision, a very clear dogma, a very clear judgment that we are separate. But from the eyes of the divine, there's no separateness like that, okay? So if we look at our vows, we're going to continue to go through the secondary vows here, and we've moved through the first 5 of the 6 perfections, and those practices of the first 5 are preparing our heart to be present to wisdom, okay? As do these practices too. So I'll go through them as they're traditionally stated, but just to say in maybe a a slightly less archaic language, that on the positive end, these practices relate to identifying and staying true to your personal path, what your path is. So staying personal, staying grounded in yourself and in your path. And that you might give that path a name like Christianity or Buddhism or Judaism or Sufism or any kind of thing like that. But at the end of the day, it's where's your stream to the opening of your heart? Where's the stream to the divine? Okay? And staying disciplined to move through that space. And as those practices shift and new arenas arrive, staying disciplined to really be able to discern, am I just distracting myself right now? You'll see as they come up, there's a lot about like, don't get distracted. Don't get too frayed. Because we don't, at the end of the day, you only have so much energy in your life. You only have so much time, and we don't know how much time we have, right? But even if you said, okay, you know, we're all going to live, whatever, to 90 years old, 95 years old, how much time do you have left? It's not that long. It's just not that long. And if you think about, like, how quickly did the last 10 years go? Right? And the rest of your life will be like that too. So we don't have a lot of time. We don't have a lot of energy. And within the time that we have, we get sick. You know, on the base level, we'll get sick a couple times, maybe really sick. Something like that for a long period of time could be possible. Other people who are close to us in our life will get sick, and we'll be taking care of them, right? We may have families, we have jobs, then we have all this other stuff that sucks up our time, right? So keep yourself disciplined to your path. You don't have time to get distracted, okay? And we'll talk more about, you know, your path might mean you study Christianity, you study Judaism, you study Buddhism. It might mean you study lots of different paths. But you need to make sure that you're going in one stream of practice for yourself, okay? So a lot of these vows are relating to that, discernment and discipline. Discernment and discipline. And then the other ones are related to staying humble, staying open to inspiration. So sort of the other side of that, it's like, be discerning about your path, be disciplined, stay open to inspiration, stay humble, be ready to move if the new idea comes, right? And then, of course, how are you going to balance those two sides? I remember hearing this rabbi say, I can't remember the percentages now, but he was saying that he was taught, I think it was like 90% loyalty to his practice, to Judaism, and 10% open to all other practices. So it's sort of like 90% of his heart really trying to go deep, deep, deep into the practices that he was given. And 10% like, I don't know, you know, what's up with Wicca? You know, what are they doing over there? And, you know, what's Oprah saying? And like that kind, and there has to be a balance like that, okay? And at different times in your life, it might be appropriate to shift that, depending on sort of, if you're really stale in your practice, you might need 30% open to other paths, or something like that. Right? But if you're in the flow and things are really working for you, I think 90-10 is good, because that gives you some strength there. So the first one is rejecting the way of the listeners, and we've talked about this. This is traditionally referring to the other foundational schools of Buddhism. So, you know, here you can think for yourself. This is one about rejecting your foundational practices. So for you in your life, what is your foundation? For all of us, ethics is our foundation, and that's at the end of the day what the listeners come down to. Strong ethical living, okay? So if you are rejecting your base ethics, recognizing wisdom will be near impossible. Because ethics, at the end of the day, is harming other people, and harming other people separates you from other people. And that's the exact opposite of wisdom, right? So the first practice of coming into union with wisdom is that you must have a strong ethical practice. And if you reject that, you will be lost, okay? So every day, if you want to get serious about your life, every day you should be checking your morality in some way or another. And there's not a lot of space for leniency in that. There's space for compassion because we have habits and things, we're in strong habits. But it's not like, oh, I have that habit, sorry, I lie a lot, pfft, what can I do about it, It's like, no, get on the horse, like change that habit, okay? Because it's really hurting you. So I think, many of you already have foundational vows, but the reason why you take foundational vows, refuge vows, lifetime lay people's vows, is to strengthen that practice for yourself and to get really clear in your mind. Because most of us, until you really look at it, we think like, I'm a pretty nice person. I mean, I know I have some issues, but like, I'm okay. And then you start to look at it, you're like, oh, I am not okay. I am a big mess. And if you're really getting subtle about it, you start to go, I'm a killer. They should lock me up. The level of affliction that's going through my mind. That would be good. Like if it starts to get that dark. As long as you have some support around you, But you got to get really clear on what's going through your mind moment to moment. All kinds of judgments. All kinds of attachment. It's pretty strong. And, until you've really looked at it, to be suspicious if you sort of go, I don't think I have that. If you look at the 10, those 10 base ones, and if you sort of, as most of us do, go, well, I have an issue with that, but not so much with that one. We sort of make our own judgments about like where our good and bad sides are. But in the text, they say those 10 movements of the mind, and then, activating speech and body, they're happening all the time. It's not like sometimes, all the time. So to take that in, none of us are exempt from those 10 until we've really started to do some serious level of purification and you're really, you're like on the verge of nirvana. Okay, so, which we all are also, by the way. Nirvana could be that, because we're not in nirvana right now. Okay? So right now I'm giving you the pep speech from the view of the listener. The pep speech from the listener, someone teaching to listeners is going, you better clean up your ethics. You got to do it, And then the pep speech from another point of view is going, you're already in nirvana. Don't worry about it. So then you have to go like, well, which is it? Right? Be discerning for yourself. Okay, so the next one is making efforts in other systems when your own is available. So these are all articulated from a very traditional point of view. So from the traditional point of view, this is saying, if you are studying Mahayana Buddhism, and again, from a traditional side, like in a really traditional way, you don't need to make any efforts in other systems. It's complete. Each of these systems, Christianity, Buddhism, etc., Judaism, they're all complete. They've lasted because they work in their completion. Okay? So if you are moved towards a particular path, then go ahead and just go through it all the way. Go through it all the way. And if you can go through one, you can see how they're all the same. And chances are you've already noticed this in your life. It's not like Christianity at the end of the day is different than Buddhism, or different than Judaism, or different than Sufism, or different than any other ism. At the end of the day, none of the isms will get you there. They're all meant to break themselves open to freedom. Okay? So you can ask yourself, what is your system? Do you even have a system? You see, if you don't have a system, you can't break free of the system. So the first step is go, well, I'm in a suffering system, habits of suffering. I'm going to put myself in a system that's bent on freeing me from that suffering. And then as you go into that system, you'll get to the point where you break free of needing any system at all. Free from systematic thinking. Free from dogma. Okay? So, yeah. So this is really about a matter of emphasis. Okay? Put as much emphasis as you can into your own path. Next one is a similar, making inappropriate efforts in non-Buddhist teachings. Okay? So a Buddhist teaching from the core level is a teaching that's teaching you that your actions have consequences and is teaching non-duality in some way or another. okay? If it's not teaching those things, karma and emptiness, which always have to go together, or you could say compassion and wisdom, same thing, then we're not in the stream of a Buddhist teaching, and we would say we're not in the stream of towards liberation. Again, Buddha means awake, so an awakened teaching. If you're not in the stream of an awakened teaching, you're not moving towards awakening. Doesn't mean you have to go to a Buddhist center and study Buddhism to study Buddhism, okay? Am I being clear? It's really important because I think at this level in the West, we're sort of already there, so it's important that we teach from this side, that we're not here studying this material in a dogmatic way, okay? That would be the exact opposite of what it's trying to produce for us. So you can think about what this might be for yourself. Of course, there's no non-Buddhist teaching self-existently, but you can be honest with yourself and say, okay, what are the areas of my life where I just sort of spend time on things that are not, they're not assisting my path. They're just wasted, it's just wasted time, it's just distraction. I don't know, you know, movies, little clicks on YouTube or whatever it might be. We don't have that much time. Being attracted to non-Buddhist teachings, even when it would be appropriate to make efforts there. So, you know, maybe you have a job where you have to study certain things, or, you know, you're helping someone out with something and it means you have to spend time on something that's not, from your current perspective, a Buddhist teaching. So, okay, then you need to ask yourself, is my distracted mind going? Like, you know, when my friend says, oh, can you help me edit my film? Do you go, yeah, thanks. That way I don't have to do my meditation. I'll be a bodhisattva and help you with what you need to have done. You know, you just sort of watch, is your mind really happy to get out of the stream of your own path? That would be this vow. You know, then you're missing something about what your path is offering you, okay? I always think of this vow when I have to go to faculty meetings, which I really struggle with sometimes, having a good view of, because it seems like there's so much sort of wasted conversation in those meetings, and I can watch my mind like, and if I'm really tired, sometimes I can think, I'm just going to go to the faculty meeting and space out, like I'm attracted to that space, right? And then I think of this vow and I go, uh-oh, you know, like I need to get my joyful effort back. So there is a category of person, I put this here for you, who's capable of studying non-Buddhist texts and not being swayed. So another way you can think of this is like, when you're first studying this material, studying emptiness, studying karma, and they may be new ideas, or like Geneva brought up, which is so important, like, I don't know, is it possible to get out of suffering? And you see, when you're at that agnosticism and there's that openness, you're also vulnerable. There's a vulnerability there, which is both positive, but can also be challenging. Because then if you start to go and read a bunch of other material, you can start to go like, oh, well, maybe it's this. Oh, no, it's not. Oh, maybe it's this. Oh, well, I heard this guy said that. I think it's that, right? And because you haven't gone through your practice enough to have a foundational grounding in yourself, where you go, I have a clear view. I do have beliefs. I have a clear sense of morality, etc., whatever it might be. And so then I can sort of hear other teachings and do a compare contrast in a positive way and not let myself just get taken away, all right? So someone who can study without being swayed is someone who can quickly grasp the meaning of what they're studying. So someone who's really quick in their mind, okay? They're logical in their approach, meaning that they have an analytical mind. They can question things. They don't just, someone says like, oh, you know, you should eat elephant. And we go, yeah, I should eat elephant. You know, you see those, has anyone seen The Wiz? Okay, I won't even talk about it then. But, you know, it's sort of like that idea of the disciple who someone goes like, wear red, and they're like, yes, wear red. No, now wear white. Yes, I'm gonna wear white, you know. You're not zombies, okay? So you wanna be logical, analytical in your mind. You can easily remember what you've studied, which implies that you can remember your own studies and your own path when you're reading other things, okay? You can't be swayed from your right path. which again implies that you've done enough practice, experiential practice in your own, that you have some real grounding in yourself about what is true and not true for you, okay? And that you'd be willing to spend twice as much time studying Buddhism. And what this means is that, again, it could be referring to traditional Buddhist texts, but it means that you have a real passion for your spiritual path, and that is really the light of your life. And so even though you might have to go do other things, or it might be appropriate at times for various reasons to look at other things, some part of you would be going, but I really just want to be home meditating. Or I would really just like to be reading, you know, the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life right now. And that's a beautiful space to be in. And I imagine that we all pass in and out of that space as we go through our life, right? But if you're in that space, really celebrate that and try to ground yourself in that. And so that when you're off, you can remember, you know, there was a time when it was like, I didn't want to do anything but come to the Mahasukha Center and study, you know, and that was my passion. And they say when you take vows, one of the beautiful experiences of going through a vow ceremony is that you can remember that moment when you get off. You can take yourself back and remember who you were in that moment, and it can right you. When you go, you know, I kneeled down, I put my hands together, I made this prayer, I begged for these vows. Who was that person? That was an amazing person. I'm still that person. I'm just distracted right now. You know, maybe I can recall up that sensation in myself right now, okay? So the next one is rejecting the greater way, again, which is Mahayana, giving up the Mahayana path. So specifically, the Mahayana path is when you are seeking your own freedom, not solely for yourself, but out of love for other beings as well. So you're seeking the whole world to be free, recognizing that you're not separate. And you know, sometimes I just think, like, if I make the cartoon version, it helps me. And I think, well, what would it be like if I was just bliss, 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 happy, 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 and I'm surrounded by millions of people around me who are angry, pissed off, sad, fighting. Who's going to party with me? I mean, it's like, you know, the Buddhas are having they're in a party state all the time. So it's like, if you're the only one at the party, how fun is the party? You know? So that, like, the sense of Mahayana is we should all be able to be at the party. We should all be able to be in that state. Because how much fun, you know, or how much fun is it going to be if it's like you and your family and you're locking the door so no one else can come in? You know, if there's any awareness that there's anyone else out there that's in suffering, eventually you won't be able to bear it. You know, maybe you can deal with partying for a little while, a few lifetimes or something like that, but eventually the cries are going to come in to your heart. You won't be able to avoid them, okay? So the way you give up the greater way is basically by sort of picking and choosing the parts of the teachings that you think are good. And they break that into 4 different ways. So saying, you know, this chapter is good, but this chapter is not as good. Or like saying this practice is Tonglen is helpful, but emptiness meditations aren't that helpful. Now, this is all from a judgment point of view, not a discerning point of view. So you might, from a discerning point of view, say at this point in my life, and the reason why you take a teacher, one of the reasons why you take a teacher, is that they help you learn how to discern. And they do that by discerning for you for a period of time until you can discern properly for yourself. You know, so as the highest level of spiritual maturity is actually to come to a teacher and say, I don't know how to discern for myself. That's real maturity. It's like to say, I really need help. Can you tell me what to do? And then they say, yeah, okay, do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this. And if you follow their discernment, you know, and if you're having a good view of them, like they're going to help you, and you follow their discernment, then fairly quickly you'll start to sense power in yourself to discern for yourself. And if you have a really good teacher, at a certain level, they're going to say, you figure it out. What do you think? You know, they'll start to turn the keys over to you. Because the point is not to keep you servile to someone else's discernment. The point is to ignite and inspire your own highest discernment for your spiritual life, okay? So So by saying, like, discerning and thinking, at this point in my life or moment in my day, it's good for me to do a compassion meditation. Or like we were going through these strategies. Okay, this worry habit is coming up. I need to apply this strategy. That's discernment. But that's different than saying, don't worry about having strategies for that. That's pointless. Just worry about strategies for this. Okay? So we really need to make the distinction in ourselves between judgment and discernment. I talk about this a lot because it's really, really key. And we have so much judgment, if we're really honest with ourselves. We have so much judgment that we can often disguise judgment for discernment. And judgment always, always, always harms us and harms other people. It is a separating force. And it is a dogma. It's a fixed quality. It is not wisdom. Discernment comes with wisdom, but judgment comes with suffering. So saying some part of the practice is not good. Saying some part of a composition is inferior. So I like this verse, but I don't like this. This verse isn't as useful. Saying a teacher or an author is not so good. I like His Holiness the Dalai Lama's books, but Lama Zopa Rinpoche, so he's okay. Or just in general saying that a particular path won't help living beings. Okay, so you can see these are all challenging because unless you're working from discernment, if you start to pick and choose, you're going to miss something of the path. My teacher Lama Murud always says it's like, if you want the car to run, you have to have all parts of the car. And what we sort of do is go, well, I like the air conditioning, and I like the carburetor, and I like the right door. So I'm just going to work with those things. And then you sort of set those up and sit in the car, and you're like, vroom, vroom. Why aren't I going anywhere? Or you're like so delusional, you're like, I'm going so fast, woo! and you're just sticking in the same place, okay? So there may be teachings that you come across, and certainly, probably there will be, that you're not ready for yet, that sort of go over your head. And those will appear like, I really don't know. or you just won't even hear them, or you'll hear them and you have some really strong aversion to it. So, when that happens, you have to have a little bit of spaciousness and go, maybe I don't understand that yet. Or like, why would I have such a strong aversion to that? What is it igniting in me? Is that a bad practice, or do I not know how to relate to it? Sometimes we hear things and we just don't know how to relate to it. It's like they always say, that the kindness of the teacher, the awakened mind, is that they appear embodied in a body like you are. They appear as a human to share that space with you, because if they appeared as they actually were, you wouldn't know how to relate to them. And if you read spiritual texts, you'll find this moment, throughout where a disciple has a vision actually of who their teacher is, and they're like, their mind explodes. And sometimes they get terrified when they see the vastness of the awakened mind. And then you go like, no, in the Bhagavad Gita, he goes, can you just go back to who you were before? My friend, my nice friend that I grew up with? Don't be God. God's too much for me right now, okay? So sometimes we have these moments and we get overwhelmed, okay? And we can get aversion because of that, because our smaller self tries to protect us from that level of opening. So just, be mindful sort of what's happening in you. Or we might be highly inspired, of course, by that vision. In my experience, it's been sort of a space of both. There's like a space of awe and inspiration, and also a space of like, oh boy, like I don't know what to do. What do I do with that? Size. So that's rejecting the greater way. Next one is praising oneself and criticizing others. So if you remember, we had this in the root vows, and here the affliction is different. So do you remember the affliction in the root vows, Heather? Who's taking these vows next week?
Pride.
Yeah, pride. Do you remember how it's specifically stated?
Oh, the vow itself.
Well, no. So the vow is criticizing others, but then it's a specific affliction that it's related to in the root vows.
Attachment or
Yeah, good. Yeah. So that's the affliction in the root vow, is that you want some gain of honor, something like that, which is also related to pride. Here it's different. It's related to pride or anger. Okay, so not gain, not attachment, you'd say, but anger, pride or anger. But same movement, okay, of the mind at the end of the day. The next one is not going to hear the Dharma out of pride or anger. So going to hear the Dharma means you open yourself to receiving a teaching on reality. It obviously means coming to classes like this, but you can, when you're sitting down for coffee with your friend, you can go to hear the Dharma, or you can go to hear them complaining. It's up to you, right? So you can be going to hear the Dharma all day long. And it might be nice to start to expand your sense of that. But this is also saying, think about, are you continuing to study? Do you make efforts to go to classes? Do you make efforts to go to where your teacher is or teachers are? At what point do you sort of say, I can't be bothered, right? There are exceptions, of course. So if you're sick, you really just can't physically travel, or you're unable to attend for some other reason, like it's too far to travel, and then you have to ask yourself, what is too far to travel, right? If you don't have the money, you don't have the money to travel, right? Like my teacher lives in Australia, and for a couple of years I was like flying all over the place, and but I also knew other people who they really didn't have the funds to travel. So then you go, okay, well, where's the how do you create the karma to have the funds to travel or to do what you need to do? But if you're serious about going and being in the stream of the Dharma, there shouldn't be any restrictions from you at the level of your mind. Your mind should be going, I want to be there, and maybe I have these obstacles right now. If you're unaware of the class, that's sort of like if you never heard of it, you don't break the vow, okay? But what this is pointing to is you should be seeking out where the teachings are. Like, why are you not checking the Mahasukha calendar every week to see what's coming up and, sort of planning out what you can go to, or all the other sites, or Dima Media Master? Like, where else do you look for Dharma teachings online? Yeah, or just like, well, no, we know where to look for Mahasukha teachings, but like where else? LA Yoga lists them, right? Inside LA, right? Yeah. Shambhala, yeah, et cetera, right? So, and if you have particular teachers that inspire you, so I should have said earlier on the not picking apart the Mahayana, that's not saying that you don't have, how to say this? We can acknowledge that we resonate with different things. We can acknowledge that certain texts we resonate with, certain teachers we resonate with, et cetera, as long as we don't make the misjudgment in our mind to say, because I resonate, that means that person is the best or better than someone else, or that text is the best text because I resonate with it, right? So resonating is fine, as long as you don't start to turn it into a dogma that separates you and separates other people, and also separates you from other opportunities. Like, well, now I'm not going to go to any other teacher's teaching, or I'm not going to read any other books but this writer, or something like that, okay? If it would be appropriate for you in your path to expand out, okay? And we have one coming up, the last one, which we'll take a break before we do it, that really goes into that. So if you're unaware of the class, and if you're already a master of the subject, which is sort of like a catch-22, it's saying, so if you're enlightened, don't worry about seeking out Dharma teachings, because you will be living in a Dharma teaching. But until that time, you should be seeking out Dharma teachings, okay? So those are most of the ones on wisdom. I want to take a break before we do the last one, because it's a bit involved. Anybody have any questions about any of that? Everyone all right? Okay, so let's take a 10. We'll come back at 3 or a little bit after 3.